Stadium lights illuminate the pitch. Millions of eyes turn toward the same field. On one side stands France, a nation that has spent decades creating football superstars. On the other side stands Spain, a nation that changed the way football itself is played. Two countries, two philosophies, one question. What creates greatness in football? For France, greatness has always carried a face. Michel Platini controlling matches with elegance. Zinedine Zidane lifting France to its first World Cup triumph. Thierry Henry turning speed into an art form. Kylian Mbappé running beyond defenders at impossible speed. Generation after generation, France kept producing extraordinary players. But Spain followed a different path. For decades, Spanish football searched for an identity. The talent existed. The success did not. Then everything changed. Spain stopped searching for the next superstar. Spain created a new way of understanding football. Xavi controlled the rhythm of matches. Andrés Iniesta transformed small spaces into moments of magic. A team built on intelligence conquered the world. Now a new generation has arrived. Lamine Yamal carries the future of Spanish football on his shoulders. A teenager representing a philosophy created decades before him. Across the pitch, France continues its endless search for the next genius. A tradition represented by players like Mbappé. When these two nations meet, history is standing beside them. Because this is not only a battle between two teams. It is a battle between two visions of football. One built on legendary individuals, one built on a revolutionary idea. And the future of football may be decided by which vision survives. Before France became a football empire, it was a nation searching for its place. The country had talent, but talent alone could not create greatness. For decades, France watched other nations lift football's biggest trophies. Brazil had Pelé. Germany had its discipline. Italy had its defensive mastery. France had potential. But potential was not enough. At the World Cup, moments of brilliance appeared and disappeared. French supporters dreamed of a generation that could finally change everything. Then one player emerged, Michel Platini, a young midfielder with vision beyond his years. Platini controlled matches with intelligence and precision. His passes opened spaces that others could not see. His goals gave France a new belief. At the 1982 World Cup, France reached the semi-finals. A nation that once searched for recognition finally announced itself on the world stage. 4 years later, Platini's France returned with greater ambition. The team reached another World Cup semi-final in 1986. France had discovered something important. Great nations need more than individual talent. They need a system capable of producing the next generation. The search for French football greatness had only just begun. France understood that talent could not be left to chance. A great generation could disappear, but a great system could continue forever. During the late 20th century, French football began searching for a new solution. The country needed a way to discover players before the world discovered them. In 1988, France opened a new national football academy. Its name was INF Clairefontaine. Hidden among the forests outside Paris, a new vision of player development was created. Young players arrived not only to train, they arrived to be educated. The academy focused on technique, decision-making, discipline, and understanding the game. France believed a complete footballer needed more than physical ability. A player needed intelligence. A player needed personality. A player needed the right environment to grow. Across the country, scouts searched local pitches for the next generation. They looked beyond famous clubs. They looked beyond traditional football regions. They searched everywhere talent could exist. From small towns, from city suburbs, from communities with different cultures and backgrounds. France was creating something different. A football network designed to find potential before it became fame. The goal was not to create one superstar, The goal was to create a nation capable of producing superstars again and again. Before France became world champions, they needed a player who could carry their dreams. That player was Zinedine Zidane. Born in Marseille, Zidane grew up far from the image of a football superstar. On the streets of La Castellane, a young boy learned to control the ball in tight spaces. Every touch became a lesson. Every game became a test of imagination. French football saw something different in him. Not only technique, but intelligence. Zidane moved across the pitch with unusual calm. He slowed the game when others rushed. He created opportunities where none seemed to exist. In 1996, Zidane joined Juventus. The world began discovering the talent France had developed. 2 years later, the biggest moment arrived. France hosted the 1998 World Cup. A nation that had waited decades stood one victory away from history. The final brought France against Brazil. The stadium watched as Zidane stepped into football immortality. 2 headers found the Brazilian net. 2 moments changed French football forever. France lifted the World Cup trophy for the first time. A player born in Marseille became the symbol of a new national identity. Football had given France more than a championship. It had given France proof that its vision could work. The country was no longer searching for greatness. France had discovered a way to create it. Many nations experience one golden generation. France created a tradition. After Zidane, another group of extraordinary players emerged. Thierry Henry represented a new evolution of French talent. He was not only a goal scorer, he was speed, technique, and intelligence combined into one player. Henry transformed from a young talent in France into one of the most feared attackers in world football. At Arsenal, he became a symbol of modern attacking football. With the French national team, he continued a tradition that started before him. France was no longer dependent on one superstar. The next name was always arriving. The country continued searching across thousands of football fields. Scouts watched young players before they became famous. Coaches developed technique before chasing results. Clubs invested in youth development. A complete football ecosystem began forming. Then a new phenomenon appeared. Kylian Mbappé, a teenager with explosive speed and fearless confidence. At the 2018 World Cup, Mbappé announced himself to the world. He scored in the knockout stages. He became one of the youngest players to score in a World Cup final. France lifted another World Cup trophy. 20 years after Zidane, a new generation had reached the same mountain. The names had changed. The talent kept appearing. That became France's greatest advantage. They were not building a single team. They were building a continuous future. Before Spain changed football, Spain was a country searching for answers. The talent was always there. Technical players, creative midfielders, footballers capable of producing beautiful moments. But at the biggest tournaments, something was missing. Spain often arrived with hope and left with disappointment. Generations of talented players struggled to turn ability into success. The country had great footballers, but it did not yet have a clear identity. Other nations knew exactly who they were. Brazil played with creativity. Germany played with organization. Italy played with defensive intelligence. Spain was still searching. For decades, the national team carried the weight of unrealized potential. The problem was not finding players. The problem was discovering how those players should play together. Then a new football idea began spreading through Spain. It did not focus on strength. It did not focus on individual dominance. It focused on something different: control, technique, collective intelligence. The belief was simple: if a team controlled the ball, it could control the match. Spain was about to transform from a country full of talented players into a country with a football philosophy. The next generation would not only try to win, They would try to change the way the world understood the game. Spain's transformation did not begin with a trophy. It began with an idea. The idea was simple: control the ball, control the game. For decades, football was often defined by physical battles and direct attacks. Spain imagined something different. The ball could become a weapon. Possession could become a form of control. Every pass could move a team closer to victory. The roots of this philosophy were connected to the football ideas introduced at Barcelona. Johan Cruyff brought a new vision of how the game could be played. Young players learned that space was as important as speed. Movement was as important as strength. Technique was as important as physical ability. Years later, Pep Guardiola developed these ideas further. His Barcelona team became a symbol of football intelligence. Players moved before receiving the ball. Passing became a conversation between teammates. The game became a puzzle solved together. At the center of this revolution were players who understood football differently. Xavi saw spaces before they appeared. Andrés Iniesta created magic inside the smallest areas of the pitch. They were not simply controlling possession. They were controlling the rhythm of football. Spain had finally discovered its identity. The question was no longer whether Spain had enough talent. The question was whether this new idea could conquer the world. Every football revolution needs players who can bring an idea to life. For Spain, those players were Xavi Hernandez and Andrés Iniesta. They did not dominate football through physical power. They dominated through understanding. Xavi looked at the pitch like a map. He found spaces before opponents realized they existed. A simple pass from Xavi could change the direction of an entire attack. Iniesta played with a different kind of imagination. He moved through crowded areas with incredible calm. He turned difficult situations into unforgettable moments. Together, they represented a new definition of greatness. Football was no longer only about the player who scored the goal. It was also about the players who created the possibility. Spain's midfield became the heart of a new era. Every pass carried patience. Every movement carried purpose. Every possession became a statement of belief. At Euro 2008, Spain finally broke decades of disappointment. The national team lifted a major trophy with a style the world could recognize. The revolution had its first victory. But Spain wanted more than recognition. They wanted football immortality. 2 years later, the biggest opportunity arrived. The 2010 World Cup. A generation of players prepared to answer one final question. Could an idea defeat the strongest teams in the world? For decades, Spain searched for the moment that would define them. Then the moment finally arrived. At Euro 2008, Spain defeated its old doubts. The team lifted a major international trophy for the first time in 44 years. But the world was watching more than a championship. The world was watching a new way to play football. Spain controlled matches through patience. They moved the ball until opponents could no longer chase it. They defended by keeping possession. They attacked by creating space. In 2010, Spain arrived at the World Cup with a new belief. The tournament in South Africa became the ultimate test. Every opponent tried to stop their rhythm. Every opponent searched for a weakness. But Spain continued trusting its identity. The final against the Netherlands became a battle of endurance. The match remained balanced deep into extra time. Then Andrés Iniesta created the moment history would remember. One touch, one shot, one goal. Spain became world champions for the first time. A nation that spent decades waiting finally reached the top of football. 2 years later, Spain completed an unprecedented run. Euro 2012 added another trophy to a generation already changing history. For a period, Spanish football looked impossible to defeat. The world copied their ideas. Young players everywhere learned to value technique and intelligence. Spain had achieved something rare. They did not only win football's biggest prizes, they changed what winning could look like. Every golden generation eventually reaches its final chapter. For Spain, the era of Xavi and Iniesta slowly came to an end. The players who controlled world football began leaving the stage. The trophies remained, the memories remained, but football never stops changing. Opponents studied Spain's methods. Teams learned how to challenge possession football. The game became faster. Physical intensity became more important. Spain faced a difficult question. Could their philosophy survive in a different era? The national team searched for a new generation. Young players continued developing inside the same football culture. Technical ability remained the foundation. Understanding the game remained the priority. But the next generation would need to create its own identity. Spain no longer had Xavi controlling every rhythm. Spain no longer had Iniesta creating impossible moments. The country needed new faces, new personalities, new answers. Then a teenager appeared, a young player who represented a different version of Spanish football. He was not a copy of the past. He was the beginning of something new. His name was Lamine Yamal. Football history is always searching for the next generation. For Spain, that search led to a teenager from Catalonia. His name was Lamine Yamal. From a young age, Yamal showed qualities that matched Spain's football identity. Close control, creativity, the courage to make decisions under pressure. He grew up in a football environment, built around technique and intelligence. The same culture that once developed players like Xavi and Iniesta continued producing new talent. But Yamal represented something different. Modern football demanded more speed, more physical battles, more responsibility at a younger age. At the European Championship, Yamal stepped onto one of football's biggest stages. A teenager playing against experienced international defenders. A young player carrying the expectations of a historic football nation. His performances showed that Spain's idea was still alive. The ball was still valued. Creativity was still celebrated. Intelligence was still part of the identity. But the future remained unwritten. Yamal was not replacing Xavi. He was not becoming the next Iniesta. He was creating his own story. And that story represented a bigger question. Can a football philosophy survive across generations? Spain believes the answer is yes. 2 players, 2 generations, 2 different visions of football. Kylian Mbappé represents the tradition France has built for decades. A player capable of changing a match in a single moment. His speed can destroy defensive structures. His movement can create danger from nothing. France has always believed in these moments of individual brilliance. From Platini to Zidane to Henry to Mbappé, the next French superstar is always expected to appear. Across the football landscape, Spain follows a different path. Lamine Yamal represents a culture built around understanding the game. A player shaped by technique. A player encouraged to create. A player growing inside a collective philosophy. Spain does not ask one player to carry everything. Spain asks every player to understand everything. These 2 approaches create 2 different types of greatness. France searches for the player who can decide history. Spain searches for the idea that can control history. Neither path guarantees victory. Football has always rewarded evolution. The greatest teams adapt. The greatest players redefine what is possible. And now, a new chapter begins. France and Spain are no longer only competing for trophies. They are competing to define the next era of football. Football has always changed with every generation. New players arrive. New ideas challenge the old ones. The game that exists today was created by the battles of the past. France proved that talent can become a national identity. A country can build an environment where extraordinary players continue appearing. Spain proved that an idea can become a football revolution. A philosophy can travel from one generation to another. One nation searches for the next genius. One nation protects the next idea. But football has never belonged to only one formula. The greatest teams in history combined both. They had players capable of creating impossible moments. They had systems capable of making those moments meaningful. Zidane needed teammates who understood his vision. Iniesta needed a team that created the space for his magic. Mbappé needs a structure that allows his speed to become dangerous. Yamal needs an environment that allows his creativity to grow. The future of football may not belong to individuals or systems alone. It may belong to those who understand how both can exist together. Because football's greatest stories have always been created when talent meets an idea. When imagination meets structure. When one player can change a moment. And one team can change an era. History rarely remembers only the winners. History remembers the ideas that changed the game. France's story is the story of endless talent, a nation that discovered how to create football superstars across generations. From Platini, to Zidane, to Henry, to Mbappé, each generation carried the same belief. Somewhere in France, the next great player was waiting to be discovered. Spain's story followed another path. A nation that transformed disappointment into a football philosophy. From Xavi to Iniesta, to the next generation represented by Lamine Yamal. The names changed, but the idea continued. Two nations, two philosophies, two different answers to the same question. What creates greatness? Perhaps football was never about choosing between genius and ideas. Because every genius needs a foundation, and every great idea needs people brave enough to bring it to life. The future of football will continue to change. New stars will appear, new philosophies will emerge, but the greatest legacy will always belong to those who changed how the world sees the beautiful game. France created generations of football artists. Spain created a language of football. And together, they remind us why football is more than a game. It is a battle of ideas, a story of generations, a reflection of human imagination. Because in football history, the greatest victories are not only measured by trophies, they are measured by the moments that change the future.